Astrology on the void of course. We speak of the void of course in the last 30 seconds of every sign, irrespective if there is a planet, sun or moon, or let's say the rising in the degrees between 29:30 and 30 degrees of every sign. The void of course can be bigger if the planet, for instance, that we find in the void of course doesn't get an aspect anymore to a planet outside a void of course before he leaves the sign. We'll get to a practical example of this a little later, and we will also get to how to interpret the void of course in just a second. Before, let's look at another phenomenon that is closely connected to the void of course. Here we see the so-called ingress. Ingress is a term that we use when a planet enters a sign. So basically when a planet, the sun or the moon, enters a sign on 0 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. This basically represents the first fresh quality of a planet or the sun or the moon in this very sign, and the quality is effective immediately. There is no such thing like a waiting period or a time that the planet needs, under quotation marks, to get comfortable. The quality is effective instantly. You can best witness this when you find time on a day where the moon changes signs from 29:59 Pisces to 0.0 degrees Aries. You should witness a dramatic change that can be observed when you are among other people or somewhere in public. Sitting in a cafe watching what's going on around you would be best. I was once sitting with a friend in the garden of a cafe chatting along. After a while, a gentleman walked down the street and went to sit in the garden of the cafe opposite the street, like just a few meters away. My friend said that she saw this man come to the cafe every now and again and that she finds him really interesting. She added, "I never dared to approach him or to say hello." Now, okay, some more time went past until a bit later, she suddenly jumped up, just said, "I'm doing this now," and walked across the street to ask him if she can share his table. He agreed, and the two spent the rest of the afternoon together. As it were, I happened to have my laptop with me because we had looked into her chart just before. So I drew a chart of the moment to see what the time quality of this curious moment was, because it was obviously exceptional. And turns out that just seconds before she jumped up, the moon had changed from 29:59 Pisces to 0 degrees Aries. We have to admit that this is quite a quick implementation, but with certain historic events, we can also observe the related quality changes with a planet arriving in a new sign. We will concentrate on ingress charts in a later video, but if you have interesting suggestions of world events or related observations, please do share them in the comments. Happy to pick them up to integrate into a video. So back to the concept of the void of course interpretation. The void of course can occur basically for all planets, for the sun, for the moon, the lunar nodes, and all the axes and house borders. So also the rising, midheaven, the descendant, and all the others can be in a void of course. The basic meaning of a void of course is that the related quality cannot manifest well. So here is some void of course interpretation guidelines. The quality of the planet in question doesn't manifest well. This is the first rule. And the second rule is that we check the ruled house. The life field that the void of course planet rules also doesn't manifest well. In order to make this less theoretical, let's look at practical examples right away. While looking for an instructive chart to illustrate the concept of transits for a video in the making for this channel, we used Barack Obama's chart and wanted to show the effects of a relevant life event. What else comes to mind as his first inauguration, of course. Now, as a pro astrologer, you first check any major flaws and traps in any chart that you look at, and void of course is one of those possible flaws. This is what we would recommend to you as well, that before starting to analyze, to quickly browse the degree placement of all planets and moon and sun and axis on whether they are okay or in a void of course, because this will need specific attention in your interpretation. Now, as it were, the void of course moon in this chart jumps at you right away. So we thought, oh no, come on, what's this? How can such a relevant world event have a void of course moon? Well, turns out it can. So we researched about this and found out that his first inauguration had to be repeated because of a formal mistake. So this first inauguration was invalid. Curious, isn't it? With this event perfectly illustrates the quality of the void of course. So, all right, that's it for this video. All you need to know, done. Well, okay, let's reflect on this a little more. What are other applications? How this can be interpreted? Here's a few examples. If you post a letter, for instance, with a void of course moon, or with a void of course ruler of birth or a similar condition, your letter may just get lost. We also had a case where documents were handed in at a court with a receipt time-stamped that the documents were received. Months later, the documents were requested again, and you're correctly guessing already, the papers were misplaced in court, never found. But luckily, the receipt was accepted and the papers were delivered a second time. What you also do when you're analyzing a void of course planet or sun or moon, you check the house that this planet rules. Here, this void of course moon rules the 4th house because the 4th house starts in Cancer. Now, this is a bit of an anticipation of advanced astrology. In the so-called electional astrology that analyzes real-life events, the 4th house represents also the reasons why something is done. Now, the reason why you would have the president swear an oath is to finalize his legitimation in office. So the reason is the other person. And here, indeed, we see the ruler of the 4th house in the 7th house. The rising or the 1st house would be the one initiating the event. Here, this is the people of the country or the code of law or the protocol, if you so will. This is why the president is in the 7th house, so he is the other one. And he is affected by it but doesn't initiate it. So the initiator is in the 1st house and the affected person is in the 7th house. But what was intended here didn't manifest, as the moon as the ruler of the 4th house in the 7th house, in a void of course, indicates. Okay, now let's look at personal charts as well. Here we have as an example Dominique Paturel, a French actor and comedian, and he has Mercury and the void of course in the 10th house. Now here's a speciality that we observed with a void of course Mercury. Those individuals, they can't stop talking and they can't stop asking questions. To check this, we went to go and look at an interview that Mr. Paturel gave, and in the entire interview, we didn't hear the interviewer say a single sentence. Mr. Paturel talked and extremely lively, asking questions, answering them by himself, and so forth, and it was really entertaining, but the interviewer could just as well have not been there at all. Now, as we just said, we also want to check the house ruled by the void of course planet. And here, this is the Gemini house, the 11th house, and the 2 Virgo houses, in this case, the 2nd and the 3rd house. The 11th house represents the children, and with a ruler of 11 in the void of course, it's difficult to manifest children. Mr. Paturel doesn't have children. The ruler of the second house, the values, difficult to tell though whether they manifested or not because we might not know. In any case, they manifested in the 10th house, in the career house. So this could mean that his values never manifest, and so they may be very adaptive. And also his third house, the third house stands for communication and thinking, never manifests in the 10th house, in the house of career. Mr. Paturel later became a voiceover artist, and he was, for instance, the French voice for Terence Hill, Larry Hagman, and a number of other well-known actors. And so that was his smart way to make endless talking into a profession. And now we want to look at Madame Segolene Royal. She's a French politician, ran also for president, but didn't win. She was in a 30 years relationship with François Hollande, who became president of France later in the term after she had run for president. And now what stands out here is the sun in the void of course. Individuals with the sun in the void of course complain that they are not chosen for the first row of executive job, typically, but they can often be deputies and have great careers. But when they run against someone else for the top job, typically the other one wins. Miss Royal used to be a minister of energy and ecology later on, so we cannot argue that she didn't have a career, really. Her long-term partner became president of France after they separated. They were never married. And if we look at the house that the sun rules here, then we see that the 7th house starts in Leo, so the sun rules the 7th house. Now that the relationship manifests is clear, but the marriage didn't manifest. Next void of course example. Okay, this one is crazy. Here we have Prince Charles of England. He has 2 planets in void of course. Here's Uranus and here's Jupiter. And if he was born 51 minutes earlier, even the moon would have been in void of course. You can say, wow, that was close. So, and now his ruler of the 7th house is Uranus. And we see Uranus in a void of course in the 11th house. We would read this as someone who will have the feeling that the partner must first and foremost be a friend. This is because the ruler of 7, of the 7th house, is in the 11th house for friends. But due to the void of course, he cannot easily manifest this in his life. His girlfriend before his first marriage was Camilla Parker Bowles, but she wasn't considered suitable at the time because she was previously married. Then his first marriage with Diana was something like a commitment he surrendered to because his then girlfriend Camilla wasn't an option. However, he seems to have continued to see Camilla after his marriage to Diana. We can say, okay, but he could have renounced his position first in line to the British crown and insisted to marry Camilla. Well, he could have, but he didn't. Maybe he didn't consider to renounce his position also because Uranus is the energy in the chart that would also revolt against rules or revolutionize and modernize things. Now, whether Uranus void of course, you won't easily feel this energy. So the same planet may be responsible for him not rebelling against these rules. Now, in order for a void of course planet to be out of the void of course, this planet needs an aspect to another planet that is closer to the 30 degrees of a sign. Here, this can be Chiron at 2813 in Scorpio. And now we check when later in his life, in the life progressions, this will be the case. So here we have the secondary progression for the time when he got married to Diana. And we see that in the progression on the outside here, Uranus is on 2840, so moved quite a bit. And Chiron is on 2813, so Uranus hasn't quite surpassed Chiron here. So still is in a void of course because he doesn't have an outer void of course planet in an aspect. So we keep looking, although here we see that his life must have changed considerably because on the outside you see the rising and the descendant, of course, at the same time just had changed signs at the time when he married Diana. So there was quite a considerable change in his life at this moment in time. So now here we see the separation was announced in December 1992. And here we see Uranus on 2811 and Chiron on 2813. So the separation takes place exactly when Uranus is out of the void of course. So this is a very precise implementation of void of course planet moving out of the void of course, and instantly the change is being implemented in the real life. And here we have the secondary progression when he got married to Camilla Parker Bowles. And here we see Uranus on 2741 comfortably well outside the void of course already. So now let's repeat. What do you need for your void of course interpretation? So you need firstly the quality of the planet itself doesn't manifest well. Then you want to check the ruled house, the life field that the void of course planet rules doesn't manifest well. And thirdly, we'd recommend you check the progressions and the rest of the chart for remedies. That means in the progressions you can see when the condition of void of course ends. And in the rest of the chart you can look for remedies, how to compensate for the life field or for the function of a planet that doesn't manifest well due to the void of course. Okay, now we had the Sun, the Moon, Mercury and Uranus in void of course. Let's briefly look at all of them in a quick run-through. We had the Sun in void of course. This is people who will be a good deputy or minister, but someone else will be president. Also here we need to check the house ruled by the Sun and see which life field will not manifest well, or at least do this later in life. We had the Moon void of course, where things will be overlooked, cannot be clarified, will disappear. A person with this condition may be very secretive and avoid the public. There are several articles out there on the Moon in void of course in a birth chart that claim that these individuals may lack a direction in life. This is curious and wrong because the Moon is not associated with life's direction at all. For the direction, we look at midheaven, the northern lunar node, Mars maybe, but certainly not at the Moon. Moon indicates the emotions, and those individuals may not access their emotions well and appear chaotic when asked how they feel, because they may not know. They don't trust their feelings because these feelings may be chaotic, and these individuals tend to learn to determine their feelings differently because they realized if they go according to their feelings, they may go wrong. Typically, they turn to Mercury qualities and think about things rather than feel. Also here, looking at the house ruled by the Moon in a void of course is recommended. Mercury in a void of course tends to be very talkative and ask never-ending questions. So there is no full stop in a Mercury void of course. Also here, please do look at the houses ruled by Mercury. Typically it's the Gemini and Virgo houses that may not manifest well as a life field. Venus in void of course is typically associated with not exactly knowing what love is, but still being able to love, of course. So that's rather an easy void of course theme. Please always look at the houses ruled by the void of course planet. Here it's the Taurus and Libra houses in a chart. These life fields may not easily manifest. This is where the progressions come in to check the time when this evens out. You can get your progressions at astro.com, and there you look at free horoscope and extended chart selection. You can find the option natal and progressed chart, and there you can draw the progressions for free. Now Mars in void of course inhibits the decision making. You can look at Pluto or Saturn or Mercury in the chart to take over this function during the time that Mars is in void of course. The houses ruled by Mars are the Aries and Scorpio houses, and they may not easily manifest. We've spoken about Jupiter's void of course briefly in Charles's chart, but haven't detailed right there much more. Here the philosophy or a sense of happiness may not manifest. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, so the Sagittarius house needs to be checked here. Workarounds for Jupiter can be found in a well-positioned Mercury, Sun, or Venus. Generally, if you look for workarounds to replace a function or a life field that is difficult to manifest, you want to consider maybe the planets that are in very good quality only. Up next, Saturn. Saturn in void of course is a serious issue. Despite the fact that Saturn has a reputation of depreciating the value of the planets he interacts with in tensioned aspects, the quality of Saturn by itself is setting boundaries, creating discipline and concentration. And if boundary setting, for instance, doesn't work, you can be in trouble quickly. You can overeat, overwork, whatnot. And when we don't have the qualities of Saturn, we realize that we need them. The Capricorn house is ruled by Saturn and would need to be checked. Saturn is difficult to replace if the quality is missing due to the void of course. Pluto can jump in here, and also a well-placed Mars. Uranus in void of course we had with Charles, and for him Uranus void of course rules the 7th house, which is in Aquarius. And the quality of Uranus alone is reform and revolution, or innovation maybe. And we didn't see these qualities with Charles. Uranus workarounds can be with Mars, Mercury, or the Sun, depending on the sign. Up next, Neptune. Neptune in a void of course is in a way similar to Neptune quality itself, so this may not easily be detected or noticed. Maybe we can see a lack of inspiration. Here, looking at the house ruled by Neptune would give more clues. Look for the Pisces house to check the life field that may not easily manifest. Although, if Neptune as the planet of inspiration and otherworldly experience is in the not manifested place in a sign, this can also indicate individuals with extreme sensitivity and clairvoyance. Neptune workarounds. So if Neptune is in a void of course and not available, so you need to work around, you can look at the Moon, Venus, and Jupiter. Pluto in a void of course may turn out individuals who don't have a clear grasp of power. Check the Scorpio and Aries houses, as the associated life fields may not easily manifest. Not having a clear grasp of power might turn out as an advantage because these people are not impressed by authority, and this may greatly add to their perspectives or it may inhibit them. You will have to check the chart for the chances. So that was it for today. We hope you find useful content on this channel and appreciate your feedback. Thanks for your comments. Please comment also what interests you. We will try to cater to the most requested themes first. For our upcoming live stream readings, please comment if you want your chart featured for free. And if you like, please add a field of interest from this video or from any other one on this channel. No need to post your birth date, time and place at this moment. We'll ask you in private, no worries. Please subscribe to stay updated with free content every Sunday. And remember to activate the notifications to be informed about new content. Thank you for your interest and see you again soon on this channel.